Fire away, Philip.
So we want to definitely connect with the consumers on an emotional level. And we want more consumer advocacy. And we want to inspire them to talk about us and be excited about us. And we do have that because we have amazing service. I mean, I can't even explain what the lengths that we go to.
Well, not only that, but I mean, our whole company is based on knowledge, service, and that's what leads to their success. Because we've been in this industry over 20 years, and it's all about that personal touch. It's all about that going the extra mile. It's just wowing our clients. It's really promising and over delivering. That's what it's all about. I mean, I put myself out there on a constant basis. I mean, I'm very engaged in social media, and I feel that because of that, people really like dealing with us because there is that personal engagement, that personal collaboration. If they want to talk to the CEO, I'm there and I'll talk with them.
But the true
that's
challenge,
what differentiates us.
The true challenge is this high price point for the customer acquisition. So we need to be able to, because once we have a customer, we got them. They love it, come back. We need to be able to get people more excited, talking, ranting, raving.
Okay, and so let me ask you this: if you had to define the most critical pain point that customers come to you with, like what is that constant theme that you have? Why do they turn to you in the end? What is that pain point that you're trying to address?
I would say the pain point for us is sometimes them coming to us and not knowing where to start or how to go about it, or you have the ones that are lured into the whole ambiance of it's legal Zoom, I'm all over the place, yada, yada, yada. And I went with them, I got sucked in, and now, it's taken so long. They promised, but they didn't deliver, and now I'm here with you, something like that. So
that's pretty common. That's true.
We get a lot of mixed type of people. I mean, we get the people where I guess they come to us because we have a lead generation tool where it's a free business name search. So, they'll submit a business name search to us, and then one of our business experts will contact them and say, hey, we realized you did a name search and it's available. Shall we get the process started? And they don't really know where to start.
And then when they're ready to start 2 months later, they'll usually go somewhere else. What was the name of that company? I don't remember. Let's just take the first one.
What is the name of your company?
Corpnet, corpnet.com.
Corpnet. I mean, something that comes to mind is this idea that, the business of acceleration. This idea that we take you to scale, to market, to clients more quickly. Mm-hmm. Another thought that comes to mind is building business around you. We build business around you, because it sounds like the contrasting experience they have with LegalZoom right now is they're another kind of sausage in the sausage factory. Do you know what I mean? They're being plugged into a much larger system, which has its own efficiencies and streamlining and channels and silos and so on. And
they do a great job. They do a great job.
Yeah. I mean, there really is this theme of a personal touch.
So right now, our tagline, Simon, on our corporate fulfillment pack, which is the final package that goes to the client, is your business, our priority, your success. Okay,
right.
So that's what we've been doing, is your business, our priority, your success.
Yeah, I mean, my experience, or the way I hear that, is like our business is your success. Is what I'm hearing. Like, you're in the business of helping them succeed.
Yes.
And I think what's important about that is that, as I said at the beginning, it makes them the priority rather than anybody else. And really what you've got the challenge of doing and the opportunity to market is that you're scaling intimacy. Like, you give that personal touch, but you scale it through over time with the one client. So no matter how big they get, you stay with them, you give them that personal touch, you scale intimacy over time. That's sort of lengthwise, or going wide, going deep with an individual customer. In terms of going wide, you scale intimacy. You do it for a number of different clients. You always get that personal touch, and you take it wide as well. So, I mean, there's a couple of defining qualities. If I was looking at the matrix as to what your purpose is, you're very, very focused on small and high growth businesses. You pride yourselves on the personal touch, which is critical, which any customer wants outright, but most importantly, it's what you need when you're a young business. You really need someone to hold your hand because there's so many unknowns and so many challenges and so many moving parts. And, and then thirdly, you want to make sure that it's focused on them. And I think there's an airline that has a line like this, but it's this idea of you above all. So if your starting point is really about how you put their needs first, how you put their success first, then that would be a very, very compelling message to them. And then in terms of your lead generation tool, you make it very targeted on small business. You make it very focused in terms of what they need peculiar to being a small business, rather than doing a scattergun broad approach to everybody out there. Is that helpful?
Very helpful. Very helpful.
Yeah, and I would look at LegalZoom as the big brother that's sitting down at the other end of the table, but you don't need to be in conversation with them. I think the other through line is to be very much focused on your customers, really celebrate the unique offering you make to them, and then you grow in your own right, or then as someone like a LegalZoom comes across and goes, wow, you seem to bring a personal touch that we just don't seem to be able to manage, an acquisition opportunity or something. So I think the biggest learning is to shift your focus away from LegalZoom and onto what you uniquely offer, and onto what you uniquely offer the customer. And it's this idea that you're in the business of building them, that their success is your business, and it's in that territory.
Yes.
So Doug has a question here, and
thank you very much.
Very, very welcome, and we can chat more in the Blab. Doug has a question here. What advice do you have for someone in their late 40s who had a successful career but feels their skills are being underutilized and has lost inspiration and motivation? How do they position themselves for change? Doug, you just described me. What are you doing? That was me 5 years ago. I so relate to your question, Doug. This is a sort of, a personal and a more profound conversation, but I think that there are life stages that everyone goes through, and there are seasons in our lives. And what I experience, and I certainly don't mean to generalize, but I've seen it with other people, is that, you can get to your 40s and you start to ask yourself, well, what was this all for? And if you spent your life, in large corporations, even more so. And I think there's an awakening coming, which is being supported by lots of different trends out there in the marketplace, whether it's awareness of the world that we live in thanks to the web, whether it's connectivity to other opportunities through social media, whether it's sort of the ability to just communicate more openly with others through all these social technologies. There's this awareness that we don't just want money in our lives, we want values, and we want meaning, and we want significance, and we want to work in or with a company that makes a difference. So what I would do in your situation is, well, all I can share is what I did, and I had absolutely no idea. I wasn't even caring about this area. I wasn't thinking about it contextually. I wasn't reading books about it. I was just in my early 40s walking around my backyard up here about 10 minutes away in Los Angeles, wondering what on earth I'm doing. I'd spent years working on Nike and years running a global account, and theoretically you're supposed to be successful, and I just wasn't happy. And the key was this: you need to accept that moment of being lost. You are lost right now. And a lot of people, and myself included, resist that moment because we're so used to being in control, or we need to feel in control, or other people are depending on us, in which case we have to be in control, otherwise everything else falls apart. When in truth, the most powerful thing you can do is step into that moment and say, right now, I have absolutely no idea what the right next step is. And right now, I don't know how to get through this. And the reason that moment is so powerful is it allows you to surrender whatever defenses, presumptions, legacy thinking, mindset that you have in the way, and to really accept that something new is going to show up. You're kind of getting out of your own way to allow something new to show up. And I don't mean to sound woo-woo about it, but what I do know for sure is that if we keep trying to control circumstances when they need to change, something's going to give. Sometimes that can take the form of a crisis. Sometimes that can take the form of, you take it out on everybody else in your life because you're unhappy with yourself and you don't quite know what's going on. You ask yourself, what the hell's going on? Or sometimes you just have that moment of self-realization that you need a change. So accept that moment. The second thing is to externalize yourself. And what I mean by that is you can't read the label from inside the jar. It's so hard to see yourself. When I started to think, what is the meaning or purpose of my life, or what do I want to get out of it, or what do I want to contribute, I started to write a blog, which I'd never really wanted to do before, but everyone was talking about blogging, so I started to write a blog. And what I noticed is certain themes emerged. And through those themes, I recognized core values that were important to me that I didn't know existed, because in the absence of actually doing that writing, if someone asked me what did I care about or what should I do next, I'd be like, oh, I like bunnies and I like the ocean and I want the future to be good, like all this sort of generic silliness. But when you actually are forced to externalize yourself by writing it down, what you care about. So I would suggest you do this. For 30 days, just write a paragraph. Don't preempt yourself. Don't sort of think it through. Don't premeditate. Don't do any of that. Just write for 30 days, just the paragraphs going, what I care about is this. And just spew it out on the page. Just spew it out on the page. And you will see, shockingly, I mean, it's almost like the old thing you hear about journaling. You will see these themes emerge. And you'll start to see yourself in a way that you haven't been able to recognize it before. And then once you articulate that, you start to see those themes, you ask yourself, how do I create an overlay between the skill sets I've developed in my career and what I'm now realizing is something that's truly meaningful to you? And it's that overlay. And I'm only using myself as an example because I'm trying to make it real rather than theoretical. I ask myself, how do I take the storytelling skills that I learned in the advertising world and my concern to help capitalism make a bigger difference in the world, because I think there's a lot that business could do. How do those two come together? And that took the form of the consultancy we first and what we do today. So I would ask yourself, what are your skill sets? And then how do they map across to that purpose that emerges? And one other little hint that I give you in there is that I discovered that it wasn't so much that I found something new, but that I remembered something that I'd forgotten. And what I mean by that is in your late teens, early 20s, you were probably a certain type of person, Doug, that, had certain things that you cared about in life. And I suspect what you'll come back to isn't too far removed from those, because after those early years, life got in the way, earning money got in the way, a mortgage, a job, a car got in the way. And now you're returning to that. So, as we all enter what I affectionately call menopause, where we start to question what we're doing with our lives and why we're here and all that sort of thing, we may often find it's a return to that sort of intrinsic nature that we had when we were young. So accept that moment of being lost. Externalize yourself, by writing and putting yourself outside yourself. And then find the overlay between your skill sets and that purpose, and be mindful of what you were like when you were kind of less encumbered by all the things that life brings along. So I hope that's helpful. And I have a question here from Sean, how to bring employees on board with purpose. How do you bring employees on board with your purpose? It's actually not as hard as people think. And we do a lot of workshops inside companies to actually make this a reality. The first thing is a fundamental recognition that each of your employees are in fact a human being. They are not just a number on the payroll. They are not a line item on your P&L. They are people that consciously choose to wake up each morning and invest their precious time going to work with you. And if you want to inspire them to enjoy their work and be an advocate for your brand, then you need to be clear about what your purpose is. And to do that, you need to share it with them and involve them in the process. So, we did this just at Christmas here at We First. You can do a very powerful exercise where you sit down as a team and if you have your purpose, you interrogate it and make sure that it's up to date. If you don't have a purpose, you define it together. And then you give each of the people in your organization, and if it's a very large organization, it might be leadership, and then you give them the opportunity to kind of share that downstream or upstream if you turn the pyramid upside down, which I prefer. But, you give them the opportunity to define what role they want to play in bringing that purpose to life. The very fact that you involve them in that process, the very fact that you ask them, the very fact that you credit them with sufficient importance to share what the company's purpose is and to give them a role in defining, the part that they can play in bringing that to life is transformative outright. If you do that, and then you do it on an ongoing basis where, whether it's town hall meetings, whether it's quarterly reporting, whatever it might be, quarterly team meetings, if you give them an opportunity to reconnect with the company's purpose, to find fresh ways to participate, it will be even more transformative. So not only doing it outright, but doing it on an ongoing basis. And then the third part, to really, really engage employees around your purpose, is to reward them for doing so. Most brands feel like doing good is in and of itself a value. It's intrinsic. It's a no-brainer. In which case, they fail to recognize that you need to close the story loop. You need to say to your employees, look at the difference we're making. You need to create that little piece of film that shows the difference that was made through the hunger initiative or campaign that you did, or the hours that they volunteered at the local food bank, or whatever it might be. Because as soon as people feel like the investment of their time and heart made a difference, they're willing to do it again because it's fulfilling for them. It gives them meaning. It gives real value to their life. But too often, brands will define their purpose. They'll tell their employees, they'll inspire their employees to get involved, and then they won't close the loop by actually showing, look at the difference this made. But in fact, you'll unlock so much power in your employee base when you do that. So those 3 steps are absolutely key. And if you do that, you'll be ahead of over 80% of the organizations we work with, because we're all so challenged by running a business on a day-to-day basis that, we always make that a secondary priority. But if you really want to unlock the full value of your human capital, the sort of largest line item on your P&L, recognize that they are human beings, give them a way to participate and bring your purpose to life, and reward them for doing so. And so we have a question in the live feed. We have from Abbott's Habit, and it says, say a brand has a bad legacy purpose-wise, or perhaps a bad rep because of a specific business practice, but has since amended their ways. Only now they aren't receiving any attention because of it. What are some ways they can effectively tell a new and more purposeful story? It's a fantastic question, If, for whatever the reason, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, you've had a brand crisis where, rightly or wrongly, you've had a bad experience in the marketplace that has mischaracterized you or damaged your reputation, here's what you need to do. And it's not hugely dissimilar to what you might need to do in real life, as I've discovered, which is you need to own it. The fastest through line for any crisis is to own it, to acknowledge that there's an issue, and to speak to your stakeholders and to come clean about it. We've had a direct experience of this recently, where a company that we work with has made a change in their policy which can be viewed negatively. And the way they did that to save the loyalty of their customer base was to take it head on and to say, we've had some challenges on our front which have necessitated these changes. They don't compromise our commitment to what we all care about based on our shared values, but here's what we're doing moving forward because this is what we can manage. And you'd be absolutely astonished how forgiving and understanding and human your community is when you speak to them in similar terms. And so if you've had a challenge in the past, I would, rather than avoid it or try and sweep it under the rug, I would take it head on and say, there was an issue that played out both inside our company and amongst our community that damaged our reputation, and that is incredibly important to us. And most importantly, you, our community, are important to us. And so we want to speak to it directly. Here was the situation. Perhaps it was not handled well. These were the circumstances in which we were operating. Here's what we think we did wrong, and here's what we're going to do to make it better. And to give you an example of how that plays out, there was you can look at Patagonia. Patagonia, I'm sure that every brand has crisis, but, they're sort of lauded as one of the leaders in terms of purposeful marketing, particularly in the environmental and footwear and apparel space. And if you go to their website and look at campaigns like the Footprint Chronicles, you can put in the SKU number of a jacket. You can see the carbon footprint in the production of that jacket. And then if you look at the end, it says the good, the bad, and what we think. So even without a crisis, they're getting ahead of it by saying, here's the bad about what we're doing. There's too much involved, too many chemicals, we're not happy with the labor issues in and around the way this is being used. And why that is so powerful, they are controlling the narrative. They are controlling the narrative by getting ahead of those criticisms. So it's not exactly the same situation, but I want to show you how powerfully it's been used by some of the leading brands out there. So in your case, go directly to the heart of the problem, explain the circumstances. Even if you behave poorly, even if your leadership made the wrong decision, say, we made the wrong decision, and here's what we're doing to fix it. And once you've done that, once you've purged the marketplace, your community, of that negative sentiment, it's incredibly powerful and instructive how quickly that dissipates, because you've spoken directly to the issue rather than having a hangover or a halo effect that continues over and over and over again. So, I would say step one, acknowledge it. Step two, explain the circumstances and what you're doing about it. And step three, use that very admission as a platform through which to introduce your new purposeful platform and explain what you're doing to that end. So suddenly that crisis actually tactically becomes a way to introduce this new purposeful platform that you're leading with. But just make sure that you re-articulate what your core values are and what you're going to do to make sure that sort of problem doesn't happen again. And really thank your community for their understanding and for their continued loyalty in what is invariably difficult times for a business at different stages. So really make it about them and speak to them and acknowledge their concerns and their needs rather than try and make yourself feel okay. And if you take that tone in the marketing, you'll be very, very surprised about how quickly you can move on. And so Jim has a question here. How do you advise, I'm just sorry, I'm moving the screen over here. How do you advise and how do the companies you work with usually measure the impact of their purpose-driven initiatives? Do you think they measure it well? It's a great question. I think, like sustainability, in terms of purpose now, you need to really be able to measure your impact and to report back on what you're achieving. And that's not as simple as it sounds. In the sustainability world, I've been a member of Sustainable Brands for many years and, going to their conferences. And in the early days, it was all about, should we be sustainable? More recently, it was about, well, then how do we be sustainable? And most recently, it's about, well, then how do we measure that and be accountable for the impact of our sustainability efforts? And that 3 stages is a maturation, a sophistication of the conversation, because it takes time to develop the tools and the data and therefore the metrics by which to measure your impact. And there's a parallel circumstance with purpose. So with purpose, I feel like in a lot of ways it's becoming, fashionable now, or a lot of brands are talking more purposely because there's greater awareness around cultural crises, there's more connected technology through social media, there's younger demographics like millennials and Gen Z coming along. So a lot of brands are doing it in broader terms. But in terms of measurable impact, here's a couple of strategies we use. When you look at purpose, you must look at it in 2 places. Purposeful storytelling inside your company and also outside your company. So when it comes to inside your company, you may typically find that you have some sort of metrics which you can benchmark against. It may be employee surveys. It may be a survey monkey that somebody sent around. But in the absence of any of that data, and if you're a large corporation, you may have annual reviews and things like that, which you can leverage. In the absence of that data, you have to benchmark it. And here are 2 simple things that you can do. Firstly, create a word cloud. Like, ask your employees what words they associate with the brand and create a word cloud around that, a snapshot in time before you actually start working with them, so that leadership or the person that brought you on board to work with them can see, wow, not only is our reputation somewhat diluted, but here are the key elements. The weighting of certain words, is reflected in the size of them within the word cloud itself. And they'll get a very quick and effective snapshot of how they're being perceived internally. The second thing is to do a survey monkey, to make it very, very simple and do like 5 questions that you send out to all employees. And you'd be surprised if you preface that survey with a very human email that says, how you feel is important to us as leadership, as a company, and as a brand. And to date, we don't feel like we've been listening as well as we could. So we ask you to invest 3 to 5 minutes to provide your candid answers to these simple questions that speak to how you feel about the company and what we can do better, and obviously it can be anonymous and all that sort of thing. So there's 2 ways to benchmark in terms of employees, and then after you've worked with a company for 6 months or 12 months, you can leverage those same tools to see what is the shift in sentiment, what is the shift, and just to give you an example of what one of those questions might be to employees is, how clearly do you understand our brand's purpose? And you give them, 1, very little, 5, extremely well. So that in 6 months' time, you can look back and, you've got these fairly safe survey questions, but you can see a shift. 40% of the company said they understood it poorly, and now only 10% do. And, direct correlation, you've got 60% who say they understand it very, very well. So that's internal. The second place it's absolutely critical to to really bring your purpose to life and measure against it is externally. And the nice thing is there are so many different tools out there that you can use. There are free analytic tools like Google Analytics, and then you've got so many different sophisticated tools, like Radian 6 and others that can really pass out the different metrics in very effective ways. But there are several different questions or metrics that you can leverage in terms of specifically to external. One is brand sentiment. So how do people feel about your brand? What words are being associated with your brand? Are they positive? Are they negative? And to what degree? The second metric is share of voice. So if there's a given conversation out there, for example, in our case with WeFirst, we're committed to business as a force for good. What is the increase in our share of voice in that given conversation out there? So you may have a 3% share of voice, given all the companies that speak to that out there, your topic in the marketplace, and then suddenly you've got a 6.2% share of voice. And then the third metric, which is really, really important, is amplification or advocacy. That could manifest itself as, increasing the number of retweets. It could manifest itself in the number of subscribers to your content. Yes, it could manifest itself in terms of vanity metrics, in terms of, how many followers you have. But more importantly, it's how inspired people are as a function of your purpose to share your content. So my larger point would be that you need to measure both inside and outside your company, your purpose in terms of how well that story is being told, and therefore how well it's being embraced and integrated, and how well people are participating and amplifying it. And you can use those different metrics, internal and external, to do so. And what's common to them both is they're very human metrics in the sense that how well do you understand something? Do you feel that you've got a role to play? How much are people sharing that with others? How much of that conversation that you want to lead or own are you a part of? And when you create those benchmarks, you'll see very, very clearly how effective your purpose is being at a human level, and because everything else falls out of that. So I hope that's helpful. And we've got a question here from Linda. Hi, Linda. And it says, what are your thoughts on consumer buy-in, loyalty, and purpose authenticity? Consumer buy-in, loyalty, and purpose authenticity. I actually think it's a very interesting area. I think purpose is often seen as a positive to build your reputation, but I think it's equally important in a cup half empty sense in that it mitigates risk. And let me explain what I mean. There is a growing demand on brands to be authentic. So they are what they say they are. They do what they say they stand for. To be transparent, you can actually see what's going on, and to be accountable for what they do. And increasingly, purpose is a way to get to that, because your purpose defines what you stand for. And once you define what you stand for, that should, in truth, dictate what you make, how you make it, how you market it, and what contribution you make out there in the world. And so in that context, purpose is critical because it allows you, it gives you permission to say, you know what, this is what we stand for, and this is how that's playing out. And so we're going to show you what we're doing, and we're going to be accountable for what we're doing. And I'll give you an example to explain what I mean, like VW with their diesel emission scandal. I was fortunate enough to be the keynote speaker at their private closed marketing session in Dusseldorf in Germany year before last, where I spoke to all the marketing people of the VW group, all their 12 brands, Bentley, Skoda, VW itself, Audi, Porsche, all these brands. And they were very, very passionate about being the #1 car maker. But what happened is, in their drive to get to that goal, they lost sight of their purpose, and obviously they were cheating through software on the emissions to manage the emissions reading of their diesel vehicles. And by losing sight of their purpose and focusing solely on their growth goals, they rob themselves of the opportunity of being accountable, of being transparent, of being authentic. And now this has come back to hurt them so enormously. I mean, by their own estimates, it's going to cost them $18 billion is what they're setting aside to clean up this mess. So my larger point would be, in terms of consumer buy-in and loyalty and purpose and authenticity, purpose is this linchpin which allows you to be authentic, to be transparent, to be accountable. And when you do that, it redefines the quality of relationship you have with your customer base, with your customer community. Suddenly, as we talked about with the gentleman earlier before, suddenly you can admit that you've made a mistake because you're being relatable and human, because you want to be transparent. You can say, this is what we're doing well, but this is what we're doing poorly. And so you stay ahead of the narrative. You don't run the risk of consumer or media activism, but rather say, in the name of transparency, on the basis of what we stand for, we want you to know that we're using these ingredients, but we're still using this ingredient, and we're looking for a better substitute because we want to be accountable for what we're doing, but just know that this is top of mind and a priority for us. So I think, in terms of loyalty and authenticity, purpose is often mistaken as only as this positive thing that can build your reputation, when in fact it's this linchpin to allow you to be transparent and accountable and authentic, and that can mitigate risk and it can avoid the damage to your reputation. And so, that brings up a very important point to me, which I also wanted to make on this Blab, which is, when you go to define your purpose, I see people do it on 3 different levels. And there's one level that I think is the most important of all. Firstly, they define their purpose in terms of their product itself. What do they make? What are their benefits? And isn't that great? And, for a long time, and much of advertising out there, you see that. You've got a problem solution, you've got product A, and it gives you product benefit B. That gives you certain bandwidth. It defines your brand, it defines your engagement, it defines the conversation you lead with your consumers within the confines of that product and those product benefits. There's a larger opportunity, which is to define your brand in terms of the category, which is, okay, what is the role we play in our category? How do we differentiate ourselves from our competitors? What is unique about us that you won't find from anyone else? And as a subset of that, you can then talk about your product and its benefits as substantiation of that. So first level, product, and you're limited to its benefits. Second level, the whole industry. You're doing something on behalf of the industry. You're changing the industry. You're enlisting what you do in your category to change the industry and move it forward. But there's a third higher level, which is the world at large. You define your brand in terms of the role you're playing in the world, the way of being you're creating. And what's so powerful about that is you can then position what you're doing within the industry as a subset of that larger proposition. And even more, you can position what you're doing with the product and its benefits as social proof of that commitment. And let me give you concrete examples. When Unilever, one of the largest companies in the world, talk about their brand, their largest proposition is sustainable living. They are in the service of making sustainable living possible. When Chipotle, which has gone through all these challenges recently, they talk about food with integrity. When you talk about Starbucks, you've got shared planet. When you talk about Airbnb, they talk about belong anywhere. These are all larger worldly propositions that celebrate a way of being in the world, which then gives them the bandwidth, the versatility to speak to their category, to speak to their industry, to speak to their product, to speak to their benefits, to speak to all the different stakeholders out there, rather than simply be confined to speaking about to their product alone and its benefits. So, I like to think of it in terms of compressed complexity. When you are defining your purpose, look at the larger role that you can play in shaping our world, in shaping a way of being, in shaping our future. And doing that will allow you to have the compressed complexity to speak to all the different stakeholders in increasingly versatile ways that are very specific to them, but it still always ladders up to that larger, singular, consistent, and scalable proposition. So when you think of your purpose, really look at it in the larger sense, because in truth, by definition, someone's purpose in life and in starting a company always has a higher purpose in mind. It always has a service mentality informing it. And we have a question here from Mark. Who out there is best at doing this that we can point to? Well, I mentioned a few examples, and I'll give you a couple of examples, and I don't mean to toot our own horn, but these are concrete examples of work that we've done, so this might be instructive, and I'll explain how we got there. I think, Tom's, which is a well-known social enterprise that has really led that space for so long. We did some work with them last year, and everyone knew the Tom's message, one for one. Some research had come back that said, they wanted to do a better job of explaining their why, their purpose. And so we looked in collaboration with, their amazing team there and the folks at Bain Capital and Tom's and the whole team and Blake. We worked with them and we realized that there's a higher order way of being that inspired this one-for-one model. And our articulation of that was for one another, for one, another. And if you watched the finale of American Idol last week, the week before, I don't watch that one. I have two daughters. I watch Yes for the Dress, The Voice. I watch all these other shows that I should not be watching, but American Idol I do not watch. If you saw the finale, you would have seen the ad for Tom's in there, and it had at the end the Tom's flag, one for one another. And I share that because, let me explain this compressed complexity. For one another means when you're talking about leadership, talking to their employees, we are there for one another. When you see employees working with employees, we are there for one another. When you have a for-profit company working with a non-profit partner like World Vision, distributing shoes or glasses or whatever it might be, they are there for one another. When you talk about all stakeholders in society, for-profit, non-profit, government, they are there for one another. When you talk about a way of being in the world that a brand can own, it's for one another. It is such a powerful proposition that is so unique and specific to the brand and stays very close to what they're known for with one for one, but for one, another is an emotional way of expressing that way of being that speaks to the world at large, that gives you that diversity in terms of speaking to all the different stakeholders. I think another couple of examples that had nothing to do with us, I think, when Airbnb came along, and they had this core proposition of disrupting the marketplace and saying, hey, we're going to take on the hotel and accommodation industry and allow you to live in people's houses more cheaply. They didn't say, we can find you a room for less wherever you want in the world. They said, and this is their tagline, belong anywhere. Belong anywhere. And this is a very powerful, evocative statement. And their insight there was that, staying in someone's home, as opposed to a hotel, which is kind of homogenized and generic and could be anywhere in the world, staying in someone's home is very different. And it gives you a sense of belonging in that neighborhood, that community, that house, that society, that culture. And so they brought this very large proposition of belonging anywhere in the world. That is such a powerful idea, because up till then, the only place you truly belonged was at home. And everywhere else was somewhere else. And they turned that world on its head. And they said, you can belong anywhere. Incredibly powerful proposition. Incredibly powerful. And one other example that we had nothing to do with, which is CVS. CVS was, the nation's largest pharmaceutical chain, and it sold tobacco products and all these different things. And most recently, last year, they banned tobacco products. They then launched a national quit smoking campaign. And they have since renamed themselves CVS Health. And the CEO said something very instructive when he made the announcement, because it cost them arguably over $1 billion to forego tobacco products and so on. He said, we are the first national pharmaceutical chain to ban tobacco products because we want to lead the future of healthcare. So they became a healthcare company because they recognized that was the largest strategic business opportunity moving forward. And then what's their tagline? What's their purpose? What's their story? Health is everything. So that resonates on a personal level. We all know health is everything. Without your health, your life is completely compromised, and at worst, you die, which makes life really hard to pull off. But also from a strategic business point of view, what do they want to own from a health is everything point of view? They want to own everything to do with health. So it allows them to have that compressed complexity, to speak about health in every capacity, because health is everything. So I hope those examples are useful and instructive in terms of who's doing it well. You've got large CPG companies like Starbucks with Shared Planet and Unilever with Sustainable Living. You've got social enterprises that have led the marketplace like Tom's. You've got companies that are changing dramatically like Mattel with Barbie, which is now anything is possible because they've given Barbie different body shapes, which was long overdue. CVS, which became health is everything. So, lots and lots of great examples of how brands are leaning really heavily into their purpose to leverage these new market drivers and inspire all stakeholders to build their business. And I have another question here, which is, which platforms or formats do you see as being most effective to tell a purposeful brand story? Does it depend on the audience or story being told, or is it something like Snapchat videos? I don't know what those kind of listening feel about all of this, but I am absolutely consistently, and our whole team here at WeFirst are overwhelmed by the new demands on us all as marketers. I almost look back nostalgically at the days when you used to go, we can't all market, we don't have that big advertising budget, we can't do that TV ad, we can't do that print ad, so we don't have to do all that heavy lifting. Now, there's no barrier to entry, and even more so with Snapchat. And, as people are referring to it now, Snapchat is reality television for marketers. Yes, it's disposable, but on a daily basis, you can be in touch with your audience and they can live intimately with you and what's going on. It is a function of your brand. It is a function of what story you're telling. And most importantly, it's a function of your audience. For example, as a service company like ourselves, which works with both small companies and large companies, both B2B and B2C, LinkedIn is very important to us. White papers are important to us. Doing videos on YouTube and having subscribers are important to us. And I think more broadly, there is a huge shift to mobile. There is a massive shift to mobile. If I was to give any recommendation as to how you should most effectively market yourself moving forward, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever it might be, it's to be mobile first and video first. And you need to experiment with your audience in terms of what they're most responsive to. Is it a 2-minute video where you offer value very, very quickly? Is it longer term formats like this Blab, where hopefully, we offer value by making ourselves available and to offer our skills to add value, to your business? Or is it, Snapchat, where you just give people an intimate look at what's going on a daily basis? I think increasingly a lot of channels are being muddied by advertising, where, it's a pay-to-play model. I mean, that's true of Facebook and Instagram and as we're all hearing now with virtual reality, soon with augmented reality, there's going to be myriad advertising opportunities in there. So not only are we going to be sitting there the whole time not looking at each other, we're going to have all these ads popping up like starbursts in front of us. So it's the end of humanity, perhaps as we know it. But I mean, I think depending on your audience, and if you've got younger demos, obviously Snapchat is very important. If you want to be all things to all people, I mean, you need to do the full bandwidth from Facebook through to Snapchat through to LinkedIn. If you're B2B, you should definitely lead with LinkedIn and leverage the LinkedIn groups. But generally speaking, both in terms of video and in terms of Instagram, which is, so symptomatic of the way we like to consume content now. Short format's critical. Visual is critical. Visual video, just whatever format. The more visual it can be, the better. You see that in website designs as well. And you can sort of A/B test things. You can put things out to your community and see what they respond to. And what we've done here at WeFirst is we sort of backed out of our business strategy. We said, okay, where do we want to be in a year's time? How are we going to get there? What content do we think is going to achieve that? And what are the pulses? What is the heartbeat of the brand over time? So we do a Blab once a month. We get 2 or 3 blog posts, out a week that we post across all the different channels. I've now started snapping on Snapchat, which I'm slowly getting used to, and I'm posting on Instagram. But always make sure the content is relevant to your audience, back out of the audience, the type of content they want to relate to, but still stay true to your purpose. It's not about just posting any photo on Instagram. Make it relevant to what you're doing. Celebrate case studies that speak to your purpose. Celebrate competitors. Give messages that really speak to your purpose. So hopefully that helps. And I want to thank everybody for investing what is really the most valuable thing you have right now, which is your time in this Blab. And I hope you will join us for these Blabs each month. They solely exist hopefully for us to offer value to you in the service of our mission, which is helping business become a force for good. And I believe that purpose sits at the center of that. And by leveraging purpose effectively, you can not only inspire all stakeholders, from leadership to employees to customers, to share your message and build your business. But most importantly, as we touched on in some of our conversations today, it can help you find that personal fulfillment, which I think we're all looking for in our lives, to give meaning to our lives, to give meaning to our days. And when you do that, hopefully we won't look back with too many regrets, and we'll think that we've applied our skills in a useful way. So thank you very much to everybody. Really appreciate your time. Look forward to seeing you on the new Blab, and there's lots of content coming out from us from lots of different channels, so we hope it's helpful. See you later.